Hi, hello. For this piece, I'm following along a step-by-step guide from this book called Painting Water in Watercolor by Terry Harrison. I just wanted to be really upfront and say that this is not an original piece by me. I am following this guide pretty much exactly, so I'm not taking credit. This is from a book. I'll link it down below. This book is great, and the premise is to do full pieces in about 30 minutes. So he keeps them pretty simple and not intimidating, which is great because I'm just starting out with watercolor and sometimes I just get really overwhelmed. So when the pieces are kept simple, you can kind of focus just on the little things, and it doesn't take hours and days or a month to do all of this. So the first step is just doing a small outline of where you're gonna put everything, and then you want to use masking fluids. I'm just using a rubber cement from like a Michaels to paint on the highlights of the water. This is so when you paint over, it keeps the spots that have the rubber cement white and you peel it off at the end. It's so you don't have to be like really careful about where you're painting. You can just paint over it and it will keep all the watercolor out. You're gonna want to let this stuff dry for a couple minutes or so. When you touch it, it shouldn't be too sticky anymore. That's when you know that it's dried. This book recommended to use a textured paper towel and put some rubber cement on that and then kind of pat it on the paper to create like splashes of water, like little dots. I don't think I was too successful with mine, but my paper towel was pretty smooth, so maybe that was the case. Most people will tape down their sheet so that it doesn't get all curled and wrinkled when you're painting on it. I didn't do that here just because I couldn't be bothered. Once the painting's dry, I do put like heavy textbooks on top to flatten it back out. So just do whatever works best for you. This is kind of just not super serious, so it wasn't a big deal. I'm starting with just painting the sky, so you get the sky area all wet first with clean water, and then I have a mix of a kind of orangey, yellow, pale sky mix, and then on top of that I'm doing a wash of a purpley blue. This is kind of set in the like almost sunset time, just a nice calm relaxing setting, and then you're gonna want to let this part dry. Once this is dry, we're gonna move on to the cliffs, and the general idea is that the further away one is gonna be lighter, and then the biggest cliff closest to us is gonna be like almost black. So you're gonna want to do a sort of gradient coming up. So what I did is I just kind of mixed a paint, and then I really diluted it so that it would be nice and soft. Then once you're done painting the first one, you're going to let it dry, and then you're going to paint the second one, and then let that one dry, and so on. Once we're done with the cliffs and it's all dry, we're gonna move on to the water. Now the brush that I'm using right now is pretty dry, so when you paint over, it's not gonna be like a smooth watery flow. You want it to be kind of dry so that it leaves some spaces, so it kind of looks like it's little reflections on the water, if that makes sense. Here I'm using just a little bit of a darker version of the water for the forefront to mimic shadowy effects. So again, once the water is dry, we're gonna move on to the next part. Here I used pretty much just a darker version of the darkest cliff. The final part of this piece is doing a kind of beachy shoreline. I started with a really bright yellow that I ended up not super liking, so I layered it a couple times with a couple different browns. Here I am using a paper towel to extract some of the watercolor to leave like white spots to mimic like maybe little shells or just light spots on the shore, just to give it a little more detail. So here it is with all the watercolor done, and the final step is just to rub off that rubber cement that we put on way back in the beginning. Don't feel bad about smearing things because at this point your water should be pretty much dry and it shouldn't make too big of a mess.